It was late on the night of August 15th, 2005, and the Dallas Mavericks were running out the clock. Not on a basketball game, on a man. They spent the whole day working the phones, chasing trade options, looking for any other way out. And when none came, they waited until just before the late-night deadline to do the one thing nobody wanted to say out loud. They cut their own captain loose. This wasn't some end-of-the-bench player. This was Michael Finley, a two-time All-Star, a wing who had logged some of the heaviest minutes in the entire league for years, the kind of player every coach trusts and every teammate respects. And to escape roughly $51.8 million they still owed him over the next 3 seasons, Dallas used a one-time amnesty provision, a brand new escape hatch written into the labor agreement, and waived the man who helped pull the franchise out of the dark. Think about that. The team he helped rebuild used a special rule on the very first chance they got to take his name off the roster. And here's the question that hangs over everything that follows. How does a player like that, a man who helped drag an entire franchise out of the wilderness, end up being the name people mention only after Dirk Nowitzki and Steve Nash are already remembered? How does a foundation become a footnote? Maybe the answer is uncomfortable. Maybe Finley was a victim of his own reliability. Too professional, too quiet, too steady. He never blew up at a coach, never demanded a trade, never turned himself into a soap opera. He just showed up, scored, defended, and carried the load. And in a league that remembers the loud ones and the legends, being dependable can be the quietest way to disappear. But to understand how that late-night phone call could happen to a man who built this team, we have to go back to a gymnasium in Maywood, Illinois, and a kid whose favorite player would one day beat him one-on-one on live television. He was born Michael Howard Finley on March 6, 1973, in Melrose Park, Illinois, and he grew up just down the road in Maywood, a working-class town on the western edge of Chicago. And like just about every kid in that city in the 80s, Finley had one hero above all others, Michael Jordan. He idolized him. He'd even get the chance to attend Chicago Bulls games, watching the building where his idol turned basketball into something close to a religion. But Maywood wasn't just a place that produced fans. It produced players. Finley attended Proviso East High School, the same program that years earlier had sent a sharp young guard named Doc Rivers into the league. That's a quiet detail most folks never knew, that the kid from Maywood was walking the same halls as a future NBA point guard and championship-winning head coach. There was real pedigree in that building. And Finley wasn't carrying the load alone. At Proviso East, he was part of a trio of talents the locals started calling the Three Amigos. Finley alongside Sherelle Ford and Donnie Boyce, 2 more kids who would go on to be drafted into the NBA. 3 future pros on one high school roster in one Illinois town. That doesn't happen by accident. In 1991, his senior year, all that talent paid off. Proviso East won the Illinois Class AA Boys Basketball State Championship, the biggest stage high school ball in that state has to offer. And Finley wasn't just along for the ride. He was named to the all-tournament team, recognized as one of the very best players in the entire field. He graduated that same year, 1991, a state champion with a future taking shape in front of him. The skinny kid from Maywood was becoming somebody. And it was that state championship that earned a teenage Finley an invitation he would never forget, a chance to stand across from his idol with cameras rolling. Imagine being 18 years old, fresh off a state title, and getting the call to come to Deerfield, Illinois, to share a court with Michael Jordan himself. Not to watch, to play him one-on-one. That's exactly what happened to Finley. The young man who used to sit in the stands watching Jordan now found himself standing across from the greatest player on the planet, with a basketball between them and cameras rolling. They ran a game of horse, and then they went at it in a one-on-one game to 3 points. And here's the thing about Michael Jordan that every opponent learned the hard way. He did not let teenagers beat him. He did not let anyone beat him. Jordan won the horse contest, and he took the one-on-one game 3-1. Both games were recorded and aired as part of a sporting chants segment on WBBM, the CBS station in Chicago. So the whole city got to watch the local kid go toe-to-toe with the king and come up short. But look closer at that moment, because it tells you something about the entire arc of Michael Finley's career. Here was a young man good enough to be invited onto the court with greatness, good enough to score on Michael Jordan, good enough to belong in that conversation. And still, at the end of the day, the legend walked away with the win, and Finley walked away with the lesson. That would become the quiet theme of his whole life in basketball. Being very, very good, standing right next to greatness, and watching greatness take the headline anyway. Finley took that lesson to Wisconsin, where he would etch his name into a record book and keep it there for 11 years. In the fall of 1991, Finley headed north to the University of Wisconsin in Madison, a 6'7" guard and forward with the size to play on the wing and the polish to score from all over the floor. And over 4 seasons, from 1991 to 1995, he did something that put his name at the very top of one of college basketball's proud programs. He became the all-time leading scorer in University of Wisconsin history. The most points anyone in a Badgers uniform had ever put up. And this wasn't a record that lasted a season or two. Finley's scoring mark stood for 11 straight years, outlasting class after class of players who came through Madison trying to top it. It wasn't until March 10th, 2007, more than a decade later, that a player named Orlando Tucker finally passed him. Wisconsin never forgot what he meant to that program. The school retired his number 24, hanging it up so no future Badger would wear it. That's the kind of honor reserved for the players who define an era. But there's a detail about Finley's college years that tells you even more about the man than the scoring record does. He'd gone to Wisconsin as a business management major, and like a lot of stars with the NBA calling, he left early, chasing the league before he finished his degree. For most players, that's where the story ends. Not for Finley. In 2014, long after he'd made his millions and won his ring, he went back and completed his bachelor's degree, this time in agricultural and applied economics. He finished what he started, decades later, when he didn't have to. That's loyalty. That's character. And it would show up again and again in his story. That record-setting college career made him a first-round prospect in 1995, but the team that drafted him would let him go before he ever truly arrived. When the 1995 NBA draft rolled around, the Phoenix Suns called Michael Finley's name with the 21st overall pick. Not a lottery selection, not a franchise savior label hung around his neck, just a solid, late first-round wing from Wisconsin, expected to find his footing slowly. Instead, he came in and played like he'd been there for years. In his rookie season, 1995 to 96, Finley averaged 15 points, 4.6 rebounds, and 3.5 assists a game. That kind of all-around production earned him a spot on the NBA All-Rookie First Team, and he finished third in the Rookie of the Year voting, putting him right in the conversation with the best first-year players in the entire league. And then there's the durability, because that became his signature before anything else did. Finley scored over 1,000 points in that rookie year, making him just the third rookie in the entire history of the Phoenix Suns franchise to hit that mark. He didn't take nights off. He played all 82 regular season games, every single one. But this is where the bad timing starts to creep into his story, that quiet curse that would follow him for years. After grinding through all 82 games, healthy and reliable from October to April, Finley got injured on the very last day of the regular season. And because of it, he could not play when the playoffs began. He'd done everything right, carried the load all year long, and then watched the postseason from the sideline because of one cruel twist at the finish line. It was the first real taste of something Finley would come to know all too well: doing the work, being dependable, and then watching the reward slip through his fingers at the worst possible moment. Less than 2 seasons later, the Suns made a decision that would define both franchises. They traded the young Finley away in a blockbuster involving a future Hall of Famer. December 26th, 1996, the day after Christmas. And while the rest of the basketball world was still wiping the holiday off its hands, the Phoenix Suns and the Dallas Mavericks pulled off a blockbuster that would reshape both franchises for the next decade. Here was the deal. Phoenix sent Michael Finley to Dallas, and he wasn't going alone. Sam Cassell came with him. So did the veteran forward AC Green, along with a second-round pick. And in return, the Suns landed Jason Kidd, a young, brilliant, and at that moment deeply disgruntled future Hall of Fame point guard, plus Tony Dumas and Lorraine Meyer. Now, read the headlines from that week, and you'll see exactly where the attention went. Jason Kidd. He was the name. He was the star. He was the player everyone was talking about. Dallas was shipping out a future Hall of Famer who'd grown unhappy in Texas, and the basketball world spent its energy debating what Kidd would become in Phoenix. Almost nobody stopped to ask the most important question: what about the young wing from Wisconsin coming the other way? Because here's the cold truth about the situation Finley was walking into. The Dallas Mavericks were not a destination. They were a wreck. A team staring down the barrel of a 20-win, 62-loss kind of season. A franchise stuck in the wilderness, irrelevant, the kind of place careers go to quietly fade. That was the locker room Michael Finley was traded into the day after Christmas at 23 years old. And nobody, not the writers, not the executives, not even the Mavericks themselves, understood what they had just acquired. They thought they'd traded away the centerpiece. In reality, the most important piece in that entire deal was the steady, unselfish wing nobody was writing about. The foundation of everything that came next had just walked through the door, and the building was still on fire. Within months, Finley would do something no one expected. He would lead this broken franchise in scoring, assists, and steals, all at once. You want to know how much a struggling team can lean on one man? Look at what Michael Finley did the moment he settled into Dallas. In his first season with the Mavericks, he led the entire team in scoring. He led them in assists, and he led them in steals. One player carrying the offense, running the playmaking, and anchoring the defense all at the same time. That's not a role player. That's a franchise leaning its whole weight on a single set of shoulders. In the next year, he showed everybody this was no fluke. In the 1997-98 season, his first full campaign in Dallas, Finley put up 21.5 points a night, grabbed around 5 rebounds, and dished out roughly 5 assists per game. But look at the number that really tells the story. He was doing all of that while logging more than 41 minutes a game. 41 minutes. In a 48-minute game, that means he was barely coming off the floor. That was the identity forming right in front of everybody. The workhorse, the Iron Man, the guy you could pencil in for 40-plus minutes a night and never worry about whether he'd show up. Dallas didn't have much in those years, but they had a wing who refused to take a night off. And this is the part of the story that history keeps quiet. Before Steve Nash became a 2-time MVP, before Dirk Nowitzki became the face of the franchise and a champion, Before any of that, there was Michael Finley. He was the player the Dallas Mavericks were built around first, the first real pillar. The man who gave a broken franchise something solid to stand on while it figured out how to win again. When you talk about who rescued the Mavericks from the dark, the conversation almost always starts with the German and the point guard from Canada.
But the truth is, the rebuilding started with the quiet man from Maywood, who simply would not stop carrying the load. Then two more players arrived, a German teenager and a Canadian point guard, and the three of them would build something Dallas hadn't seen in a generation. Slowly, the pieces started arriving in Dallas. A skinny 7-foot teenager from Germany named Dirk Nowitzki, who could shoot like a guard and would change the way the world thought about big men. And a crafty point guard out of Canada named Steve Nash, who saw passing lanes the way a chess master sees the board 3 moves ahead. And there, already in place, already established, already an all-star caliber wing, was Michael Finley. Together, the three of them became known as the Big Three. They turned Dallas into a track meet, a fast, free-flowing, run-and-gun offense that lit up scoreboards and put fear into opponents who hadn't taken the Mavericks seriously in years. This was basketball as entertainment. Up and down the floor, threes raining, the pace relentless. And the results spoke loud. A franchise that had been one of the absolute worst teams in the league transformed into a 50-win machine. They reached at least 50 victories and marched into the playoffs 4 straight seasons. From the laughingstock of the league to a genuine contender. That's the turnaround Finley, Nash, and Nowitzki engineered together. But here's the framing that matters most, the detail that gets lost every time this story gets told. Finley was an all-star before either of them. Before Nash made his first all-star team. Before Dirk made his. Finley was already there. He was the established star, the veteran presence who helped the younger two grow into the legends they'd become. Think about that dynamic, the order of arrival. Finley was the proven one, the anchor the other two could develop alongside. He wasn't the kid learning at the feet of greatness this time. He was the one holding the floor steady while greatness took root around him. And in a cruel twist of how history works, the man who was there first would end up being remembered last. By the year 2000, Finley had reached the mountaintop of individual recognition, but a strange and little-remembered record was about to follow. In 2000, the call finally came. Michael Finley was selected to represent the Western Conference in the NBA All-Star Game, the official stamp that he belonged among the elite. He stepped onto that floor with the best players in the world and scored 11 points in the showcase. And the following season, in 2001, he was selected again, a 2-time All-Star. The recognition his game had been earning for years was now on the record, in black and white. But sandwiched right in the middle of those All-Star honors came one of the strangest and most overlooked feats of his entire career. On January 23, 2001, in a single half of a single game, Michael Finley recorded 8 steals. 8 in one half. That tied an NBA record, a mark for thievery in 24 minutes of basketball that almost no one in league history had ever matched. He didn't break it, but he stood right alongside the very best ball hawks the game has ever seen, if only for one electric night. And it points to the part of Finley's game that people forget. He wasn't just a scorer, he was a defender, a two-way wing who could take the ball away from you as easily as he could put it in the basket. But the deepest truth about this stretch of his career isn't the all-star nods or the steals record. It's the sheer, almost unbelievable durability. From the late 90s into the early 2000s, across 4 full seasons, Finley played every single game while logging more than 41 minutes a night. Not most games, every game. By at least one analysis of that era, he logged more total minutes than just about any other player in the entire NBA over that span. He was the league's ultimate Iron Man, the one you could count on for everything, every night, no excuses. That Iron Man durability made him one of the most relied upon players in basketball, and in July 2001, the Mavericks rewarded him with a contract that would later become the very reason they cut him loose. By the summer of 2001, Michael Finley had earned his payday, and Dallas was ready to write the check. In July of that year, the Mavericks signed him to a massive 7-year contract extension, a deal reported in the range of $101 million. For a kid drafted 21st overall, for a man who'd carried a broken franchise on his back and helped rebuild it into a contender, this was the reward. Generational money. Security. The franchise telling him, in the loudest language the NBA has, that he was their man. But hold on to that number, because there's a dark irony buried inside it. That very contract, the one that recognized everything Finley had done, would one day become the exact reason the Mavericks felt they had to let him go. The reward and the eventual goodbye were written on the same page. He just couldn't see it yet. Nobody could. Then came 2002, and a rare stumble on the international stage. Finley was selected to represent the United States at the FIBA World Championship, a chance to wear his country's colors among the best America had to offer. But that tournament turned into one of the great embarrassments in USA basketball history. The American team lost a record 3 games and failed to win the championship outright, a shocking outcome for a roster of NBA talent. It was a blemish on a golden generation, the kind of result that wasn't supposed to be possible, and Finley was there for it. Another moment where being part of the effort didn't come with the trophy at the end. Meanwhile, back home, the climbing salary brought climbing pressure. As Finley's pay rose each year, so did the expectations stacked on him, and so did the financial weight pressing down on the franchise's books. A big contract is a beautiful thing the day you sign it. But in the NBA, it can quietly turn into a target. But while Finley signed that mega deal, a quiet shift was happening inside his own locker room. A 7-foot German was about to become the face of the franchise Finley had built. For a few years there, Michael Finley and Dirk Nowitzki shared the spotlight in Dallas as equals, 2 stars carrying a rising team. But anybody who watched closely could feel the ground shifting. The 7-footer from Germany wasn't just developing, he was becoming something special. A scoring force the league had never quite seen before. A big man who could shoot over anyone and create his own shot in the clutch. And as Dirk climbed, the balance of the franchise quietly tilted. This is the part of the story nobody likes to talk about, because there's no villain in it, no feud, no screaming match in the locker room. Just the natural, painful arithmetic of an NBA team. There can only be one true centerpiece. And as Nowitzki blossomed into a genuine superstar, Finley began sliding into a supporting role on the very team he'd helped build from the rubble. And it wasn't only the rise of Dirk that pushed him there. It was the mileage. All those minutes were starting to add up, and the body keeps a receipt. Consider this. From the late 90s all the way through the 2002 to 2003 season, Finley logged 7 straight years of averaging at least 38 minutes a night. 7 seasons. No real rest, no load management. That phrase didn't even exist yet. He just kept grinding, night after night, year after year. So here came the cruel intersection. His salary was climbing toward the top of the roster, while his production was beginning to slip. 2 things were happening at once, and both of them worked against him. Dirk was getting better and demanding more of the offense, and Finley's legs were carrying the wear of all those Iron Man seasons. The math was turning ugly, and it wasn't his fault. But watch how he handled it, because this is the heart of who Michael Finley was. He didn't pout, He didn't demand the ball back. He didn't go to the media complaining that this was his team first. He stepped aside with dignity and stayed a clutch contributor, the steady veteran hitting big shots, holding the locker room together, doing whatever the team needed. He accepted being the dependable one, even as the dependable one slowly became the overlooked one. That's the human cost buried in this story. Being reliable means people stop worrying about you. And when people stop worrying about you, it gets a whole lot easier to let you go. And then, on a single August night in 2005, the franchise he had carried made a cold business decision that no amount of loyalty could stop.
Let's walk through that night the way it actually happened, hour by hour, because the details tell you everything about how the business of basketball really works. The new labor agreement had handed teams a brand new tool, a one-time amnesty provision. Here's what it did. A franchise could cut a player and wipe his salary off their luxury tax calculations, even though they still had to pay him every dime they owed. It was a financial escape hatch, pure and simple. And Mark Cuban, the Mavericks owner, was staring at a luxury tax bill he badly wanted to shrink. Finley's contract, with roughly $51.8 million still owed across the next 3 years, was the biggest weight on the books. So on that August night, the Mavericks went to work. They spent the entire day exploring trade options, working the phones, trying to find any path that didn't end with cutting their own captain. They didn't rush it. They didn't do it carelessly. They chased every alternative they could find. And when every other door closed, they waited until just before the late-night deadline and used the amnesty clause to waive Michael Finley. Now understand exactly what this was and what it wasn't. This was not about Finley's character. It was not about him being washed up or causing problems. He was still owed every cent of that contract, guaranteed, no matter where he played next. This was about Cuban's books, cold accounting. A man being released, not because anyone doubted him, but because the rules finally made it cheaper to say goodbye. And you could hear the weight of it in the words of Donnie Nelson, the team's president of basketball operations, who had a history with Finley that went back years. "This is the hardest part of our business," Nelson said. "Mike and I started out in Phoenix together, got reunited here, and obviously, he was a key part in rebuilding this franchise." He went on to call it a very difficult several weeks for the entire organization. Read between those lines. The men making this decision knew exactly what they were doing. They knew who Finley was, what he'd given, what he'd meant. And they did it anyway, because in the NBA, loyalty and the salary cap rarely sit at the same table. Suddenly, the captain of the Mavericks was a free man, pursued by 4 contenders, and the team he chose would put him on a collision course with Dallas itself. A man like Michael Finley does not stay unemployed for long. The moment he hit the open market, the phones started ringing. The Detroit Pistons came calling, the Miami Heat, the Minnesota Timberwolves, and even his old team, the Phoenix Suns, the franchise that drafted him a decade earlier, wanted him back. 4 real suitors, all of them seeing exactly what Dallas had just let go. A battle-tested wing who could still shoot, still defend, and still win. But Finley made a choice that raised eyebrows all over Texas. He stayed in the state. He signed with the San Antonio Spurs. Sit with that for a second. The man who built the Dallas Mavericks signed with the Mavericks' fiercest in-state rival. The Spurs were everything Dallas wanted to be, a disciplined, championship-tested machine led by Tim Duncan and Greg Popovich. And in September of 2005, Finley put pen to paper on a 3-year deal worth around $8.67 million with a player option for the final season. Now do the comparison, because it's stunning. He'd been owed $51.8 million by Dallas. He signed in San Antonio for a fraction of that, a sliver of his old salary.
But remember, thanks to the amnesty rule, he was still collecting the guaranteed money from his Mavericks contract. So this wasn't really about the paycheck. This was about something Finley had been chasing his entire career and had never gotten his hands on. A ring. A real shot at a championship. He'd carried broken teams in Phoenix and Dallas. He'd been the Iron Man, the foundation, the dependable star, and he had nothing to show for it but individual honors. So when the chance came to join a contender, even if it meant taking a back seat, even if it meant wearing the uniform of his old team's bitter rival, he took it. He chose winning over comfort. He chose the chase over the spotlight. And the basketball gods are rarely subtle, because in the very next playoffs, Finley would face his old team, and an old teammate would throw a punch that got him suspended. To survive in San Antonio, Michael Finley had to do something a lot of former stars simply cannot. He had to reinvent himself. For years, he'd been the engine, the high-usage scorer who carried the offense for 40-plus minutes a night. Now he was a complementary piece, often coming off the bench, primarily backing up the electric Argentine guard Manu Ginobili. And rather than fight it, Finley leaned all the way in.
He sharpened the part of his game that aged the best, his outside shooting, and turned himself into a reliable spot-up threat for a championship contender. That's not easy for a proud man. That's a kind of humility most stars never find. And then the schedule served up some real drama. In the 2006 playoffs, the Spurs ran into Finley's old team, the very franchise that had cut him in the second round. The team he built against the team he joined. You couldn't write it any better. It got physical, and it got personal. In Game 5 of that series, Finley got into it with a former teammate, Jason Terry, and Terry threw a punch at him, a real one. The league came down hard, suspending Terry for the next game of the series. Think about the layers in that moment. A man cut by Dallas, now drawing a punch from a Dallas player on the playoff stage. The bad blood was real, and Finley was right in the middle of it. The series itself became an instant classic, and a brutal one for the Spurs. San Antonio fell behind 3-1, staring at elimination. Then they clawed all the way back, winning 2 straight to force a deciding Game 7. And in that final game, with everything on the line, the Mavericks beat them in overtime. Read that again. Finley's old team eliminated him. The franchise that waived him sent him home. After all of it, the reinvention, the humility, the comeback from 3-1 down, the ending was Dallas walking off the floor as the winner one more time. That heartbreak only set the stage for the redemption Finley had chased his entire career, a championship that would arrive in his 12th NBA season. The very next year, everything Michael Finley had sacrificed for finally paid off, and it started with a night that reminded everybody the old gunner still had something left in the tank. It came in the first round of the 2007 playoffs against the Denver Nuggets, Game 5. Finley got hot, the kind of hot that lights up a building. He let it fly from deep, and he could not miss, knocking down 8 3-pointers on 9 attempts. 8 of 9 from behind the arc in a playoff game. That performance set a San Antonio Spurs franchise record for 3-pointers in a single playoff game, breaking the mark of 7 that had been set by his teammate Bruce Bowen back in 2003. The role player had become the difference maker on the biggest stage, exactly when his team needed it. And the Spurs kept rolling. That postseason, San Antonio marched all the way through and captured the NBA championship. After 12 long seasons in the league, 12 years of carrying broken teams,
of grinding through Ironman minutes, of watching others lift trophies, Michael Finley was finally a champion. He had his ring. But there's a bittersweet truth tucked inside that triumph, and it's the truth that defines his entire story. He didn't win it as the star he once was. He won it as a role player, a complimentary piece on somebody else's team, in somebody else's city, wearing the uniform of his old rival. The two-time All-Star who built a franchise got his championship only after he'd let go of being the man. And yet, there's a quiet justice in that too. The very qualities that made him easy to overlook, the durability, the professionalism, the willingness to do whatever the team needed without complaint, those were the exact qualities that finally got him a ring. He didn't win it by being loud. He won it by being dependable, all the way to the end. The thing that made history forget him was the same thing that finally made him a champion. With the ring secured, Finley turned down a wave of suitors to stay in San Antonio. But the final chapter of his playing career would end on a haunting near miss in Boston. By the summer of 2008, Finley was a free agent again, and the offers came in from real places. The Boston Celtics wanted him.
So did the New Orleans Hornets and the Cleveland Cavaliers. Any one of those teams could have given him a fresh start and a paycheck. But he looked at the franchise that had finally given him a ring, the team that took him in when his old city cut him loose, and he chose loyalty. He re-signed with the Spurs, sticking with the organization that had rewarded his sacrifice with a championship. For 2 more seasons, he was a Spur, the steady veteran, the trusted hand. But by the spring of 2010, the chase for one more title was pulling at him, and he made a quiet, almost selfless request. He asked San Antonio to set him free.
On the 1st of March, the Spurs honored that request, buying out the last year of his contract and waiving him so he could go hunting for one final shot at glory. 3 days later, on the 4th, he reached a verbal agreement with the Boston Celtics, one of the proudest franchises in the sport, loaded with veterans chasing a ring of their own. And then came a detail you almost couldn't script. He officially signed with Boston on the 6th of March, 2010, his 37th birthday. A new uniform, a new chase, on the very day he turned 37 years old. It set up the perfect ending. Finley joined a Celtics team good enough to go all the way, and they did push deep into June.
Boston reached the finals and ran into the defending champion Los Angeles Lakers, Kobe Bryant and that purple and gold machine. The series went the distance, 7 games. Everything Finley had chased one last time, sitting right there within reach. And then, Boston lost Game 7. So close he could touch it, and it slipped away. One more time, the trophy belonged to somebody else. At the end of that season, Michael Finley announced he was done. After 15 years, the Iron Man finally walked off the floor for good. A champion once, a near champion twice, and never once the loud one. When the buzzer sounded on that Game 7, Finley's playing career was over. But his second life, inside the very franchise that once cut him, was about to begin. Now, here's where the story takes a turn nobody saw coming. Around 2012, Michael Finley walked back through the doors of the Dallas Mavericks, not as a player, but as a front office man. The same organization that had used a special rule to cut him loose welcomed him back into the building. And the same owner who'd signed off on that late-night goodbye, Mark Cuban, watched this quiet new executive go to work and quickly came away impressed. It didn't take long for Cuban to trust him with something big. When Dallas set its sights on landing the star point guard Deron Williams away from the Brooklyn Nets, Cuban put Finley right in the middle of the pitch. He sent him out alongside head coach Rick Carlisle and basketball operations president Donnie Nelson, the same Nelson who'd spoken those heavy words the night Finley was waived, to recruit Williams in person. The mission didn't land. Williams stayed put. But think about what that trip represented. The man Dallas had once cut was now one of the faces the franchise sent out to chase its next star. The wound had healed into something like family. But the basketball itch never fully leaves a man like Finley. He had never really stopped training. Even working in the front office, pushing 40 years old, he kept his body ready. And in 2012, the Mavericks invited him to training camp as a player on a non-guaranteed contract. A real shot, however small, at one more run. And then came a twist so cruel, it almost rhymes with how he started. A minor calf injury flared up and ended the comeback before it could begin. Cast your mind all the way back to his rookie year in Phoenix, when he played every single game and then got hurt on the final day, missing the playoffs. Here he was, more than a decade and a half later, undone again by his own body at the worst moment. The Iron Man's legs had carried him through 15 seasons, and they had the last word on whether there'd be a 16th. Reconciling with the man who once cut him was only one surprise, because off the court, Finley had quietly become something almost no one associated with a basketball player: a Hollywood film producer. Most people who followed his playing days never knew this side of him. Somewhere along the way, Michael Finley became a film producer. Real movies with real weight behind them. He earned a producer credit on Lee Daniels' The Butler, the acclaimed historical drama, and another on the 2016 film, The Birth of a Nation. A retired wing from Maywood, his name in the credits of serious cinema. That's not the path you expect from a guy who spent 15 years grinding through 40-minute nights, and that's exactly the point. Finley was always more than the box score suggested. Then there's the promise he kept to himself. Remember, he'd left Wisconsin early for the NBA, walking away from his degree with the league calling. Most men let that go. Finley didn't. In 2014, long after the money and the ring, he returned to Madison and finished what he started, completing his bachelor's degree in agricultural and applied economics. And the school thought so much of the moment that they asked him to address the graduates at the winter commencement. Picture that, a former all-star standing before a crowd of young people, telling them to finish what they begin, because he just had. And inside the Mavericks, his climb continued. Over the years, he took on real authority in the organization, his responsibilities growing through senior roles in basketball operations and player personnel, eventually carrying front office titles that have shifted and expanded over time, all the way towards steering the team's basketball decisions. The quiet wing had become a quiet power broker. The same building, the same franchise, a completely different chapter, and this time, nobody was cutting him loose. It paints the picture of a man who refused to be defined by any single role. Champion, executive, graduate, producer. He kept becoming more long after the cheering stopped. All of which leaves us with the real question this entire investigation has been circling. Why is a two-time All-Star who built a franchise and won a ring still the player history mentions last? So let's add it all up, the way the record book does. 1,103 games played across 15 seasons. 17,306 points. A career average of nearly 16 points a night. And in Dallas, the place where his legend should have been carved deepest, he poured in close to 20 points a game across more than 600 contests. Those are not the numbers of a role player or a footnote.
Those are the numbers of a genuinely great professional basketball player. And yet, here we are, talking about the man people mention last. So why? Here's the answer this whole story has been building toward. The very things that made Michael Finley great are the same things that made history overlook him. He was reliable. He was professional. He never created drama, never demanded the ball back when Dirk took over, never blew up the locker room when the franchise slid him into a smaller role, never pouted when the team he built used a brand new rule to cut him loose. He just kept showing up and doing the job.
And in a league that builds its myths around the loud ones, the wounded ones, and the larger-than-life legends, the dependable man becomes the easiest one to forget. Steve Nash became a two-time MVP and a legend at point guard. Dirk Nowitzki became the face of the franchise and a champion in his own right. And the man who was there first, the man who was an all-star before either of them, faded politely into the background. But understand what this story is not. It is not a tale of wasted talent. It is not a life that fell apart. There's no tragedy here, no ruin, no cautionary ending. Finley helped rescue a franchise from the wilderness, won a championship where it counted most, finished his degree because he'd given his word, built movies, and built a second career as an executive inside the very organization that once let him go. He outlasted the narrative that forgot him. He's still in the game today, still shaping it, still in the building. So go back to that late-night phone call in August of 2005, the captain being waived just before the deadline, the franchise he carried choosing the math over the man. Back then, it looked like the quiet end of a quiet star. But now, you know better. That wasn't the end of Michael Finley's story. It was just the moment the world looked away, right before the dependable man from Maywood quietly went and won anyway.